Hey there YouTube, I'm Yukitsu, this is Yukitsu Times, welcome to my channel, welcome to Battlefleet Gothic. So it just came out today and some slight patches came out. One of the only things that I really think is worth talking about is they've added the Widowmaker Destroyer to the Imperials. This is a terrible cruiser or escort in every capacity except for its detection range of 10,000, which means that you can save a skill slot on one of your ships, which is extremely valuable. So if you ever find yourself up against somebody that you suspect is going to hide in the gas clouds or whatever, just take a Widowmaker and keep it in the back and just have it around as a sort of mobile probe thing that can detect things. You can stealth it and then have it detect again. Later on, you can upgrade this to 12,500, so that's an interesting thing. The other thing they've added is incendiary torpedoes. These work very fundamentally like torpedoes. They hit, they cause some damage. The difference here is that these cause, the melted torpedoes cause a fire critical hit against the enemy ship. It ticks down damage. It ultimately is similar. It does more damage ultimately than the torpedoes because you're allowed to hit repair and immediately stop all the fires. So if you get hit by like 20 melted torpedoes and then hit repair right away, you will take no damage basically. But if they don't have repair up, then it can cause more damage than the regular torpedoes. I still don't particularly think they're easy to hit with though, so I don't really use them. Now, we got our fleet back up the exact same way it was before. I still think that this is a very powerful setup for your fleet early on in the game. If we were to look at our skills here, they have not changed any of these for the Imperials, and if we go to upgrades, they have changed them a little though. So you will start with a very, very similar sort of setup here. The most interesting things that they've added for the Imperials are the Mizoa pattern drive. It increases your ship speed by 25, but if you take a critical hit to the engines, you can no longer use all ahead full. So you also can't, rotate or anything like that. There's also the power ram, which I don't really think is a very sensible decision for them. It's not easy to ram with these ships against the faster, more agile factions, and against the tougher factions, like having the power ram, ramming damage plus 50%, it already does a lot of damage, and you're not going to reliably be able to pull it off. So unless you're really good at ramming, don't bother with that one. The next thing, they've lost the plus 10 to troop value versus lightning strikes. Instead, they have got the Voss pattern void shield, and this is basically armor for their void shield. Now, strictly speaking, on the first volley, the extra 100 armor is a plus. It's a ×2 multiplier to your shields. The Voss pattern void shield is a times 1.25 multiplier to your shield. So there's a big difference between additional void shield generator, or this is, I can't remember actually. I think it's a little bit less than that, but basically the extra void shield first off on a light cruiser is much more significant than the Voss pattern. The one good thing for the Voss pattern is once you get to heavier cruisers that have more shields innately, that 25% chance is going to matter a lot more since it's going to be applying to hits across a lot more of your shields since they're going to last a lot longer. But anyway, we're going to get into the guide for new players, which is, once you've played a couple games, you're going to get a cruiser slot, and it gets a little bit intimidating here since you're only allowed to pick one of these guys. And you can get one, not attach anything to it, experiment around with a little bit with it, but I'd like to explain a little bit about what makes each of these special. So first of all, we got the Dictator here, and this is an ordnance ship. This one has a big, heavy torpedo bay at the front, making it very, very good if you can land those torpedo shots, if you're good at that. It's got 2 sets of macro batteries, which is not great, and it's got 2 ordnance launch bays. The ordnance launch bays are fighter bays. For a cruiser-class ship with only 2 launch bays, this is not spectacular, but it does have a decent armament backing that up. So this is a good ship for having that carrier capacity in an Imperial fleet, which normally has very poor carrier capacity. They have some of the lower odds of having that ability, and this can help protect you against enemy fighter swarms if they happen to be going that route. If that happens to be in the meta, then you'll probably pick up something like the Dictator, just so you can stop those assault boardings from those boarding ships. The next is the Gothic. This is an interesting one in that it has lance batteries that are side-facing. Now, the rate of fire on these is not great, but there are actually a large number of lance batteries, meaning this has good burst damage. Fires a shot every, I think, 12 seconds is the way that's written there. So this is a great way to penetrate heavy armor ships, but typically you don't actually deal that much damage per second with the Gothic. So the Gothic right now, I think you would want to give a skip. It does have the Prow Torpedo Launcher, so you could also rely on that, but the Lance batteries as they've got them here, and especially because the Imperials lost some of the skills that boost Lances, just sort of as a sitting Hulk that doesn't do that much damage per second, doesn't have a great niche in the army, What's good about it is it ignores armor value, so if you can strip the shields down using a different ship and then get the Gothic in after that, then it's pretty good, but that's not necessarily the easiest thing to do. Next is the Dominator, and this is a really special ship. It doesn't have the prow torpedoes, instead it has a Nova cannon, which is a lovely, lovely gun. It does huge, huge damage across massive range. It can force an enemy that is trying to stay away from you to close with you because it wants to avoid getting shot by that Nova cannon. And it's got a really good macro battery set. It's got all 4 of them are the heavy macro battery, essentially. Deals huge amounts of broadside damage and can pound away really, really effectively. You might notice that the rate of fire on these is the same as the Gothic's lances. The reason that the Gothic's lances I don't particularly like as much is because they only deal 12 damage to shields, whereas this one does 18 damage to those shields, and usually I find the macro batteries have a sort of beefier broadside number of shots fired, so maybe not, but that's how it sort of feels to me. Next up, we got the Tyrant. This is a little bit of a gimmicky ship. It's trying to be a little bit like a Chaos ship in that it has these plasma macro batteries. It has the front-facing torpedo launchers, but we're not going to necessarily want to worry about those. It does have also a regular set, so it has long range, it has a little bit of shorter range. It's ideal in the shorter range, but if you're going to do that, then you might as well take the Dominator. And the torpedoes, again, are just torpedoes. They're nothing special. The last one is the Lunar, and it is a really weird ship. It mixes up lance batteries and macro batteries all at that 6,000 range. The problem with ships that mix armaments is that the mixed armaments can't be upgraded as well as mono armaments. So if you wanted lances, you would go with the Gothic. If you wanted macro batteries, you'd get the Tyrant or the Dominator. And honestly, I would usually get the Dominator. The only ones that really stand out to me are the Dominator and the Dictator, because they can both fill roles that the other ships can't. And more importantly, they can fill roles that your light cruisers cannot. These all have that sort of very strong broadside as well as a torpedo launcher at the front. The Dominator and the Dictator both still have decent broadsides, although the Dictator is the one that has a pretty bad broadside, but they all still fulfill that sort of torpedo boat function. The Dominator instead has that Nova cannon at the front. The Dictator has those carrier slots as well as the torpedoes. So those both fill niches that cannot be filled by the light cruiser role. So we're going to go ahead and pick the Dominator in this case. And as you can see, we've got our 2 skills on this ship. So when you've got a big capital ship like this, and it's this big sort of expensive thing, you typically want to have it be well protected. It's not necessarily an easy thing, though, to protect a big ship like this, especially early on in the game. But what I like to do for Dominators is try and get this Nova Cannon in conjunction with a stasis bomb. I find that that combination is just really powerful. If you can get an enemy to be stasis, fire the Nova Cannon at where they're stuck, and then deal huge, huge damage to them while they're stuck there, that's a good combination. And the other thing that I like to take is the supercharged Void Shield, because while we're early on in the game, this is going to be sort of a very tanky ship, and I'll get more cruiser slots as I play the game. And as I get those other cruisers, they can fill in different roles, but for now, this is my capital flagship. So I want it to be sort of like the centerpiece of my navy, and that means that I have to have it well protected. Another thing that we want to look at is the core statistics. All of our ships have 800 hull integrity, 200 shield, 150 speed, 10 degree rotation, 5,000 detection, troop value of 60, turrets 12, and then armor of 75, 50, 50. So it's got a very beefy stat line for a standard cruiser. And it is really quite tough to take one of these down at this stage in the game. Of course, later on when you've got battleships or something like that, this thing's a little ant compared to a battleship. But until then, it's got a very good broadside, it's got thick hit points, it is a very nice ship. So let's go ahead and hit search here. Been facing off against a lot of Chaos players for some reason, and it's a little bit peculiar. I don't think people yet realize that Chaos is not a brawler faction. Alright, so we got a cruiser clash. I don't want to actually take the big expensive ship for a cruiser clash because I think I can only afford it, but alright, so we're going to have our cruisers just because that's what I'm trying to highlight in this video, and I guess we're going to actually have to take some frigates here, which I don't particularly like, but alright, well, we'll back it up with 2 firestorms, so this will be a chance as well to show you a little bit of escort play and why I don't like them particularly. But yeah, it'll be a little bit rough having only one ship here. So you can see that massive cannon in front there, that's the Nova cannon, and it is what entices people to move closer to an Imperial fleet. If you are playing these guys, the reason that's important is because people will try to run away from Imperials. They don't want to be up close getting shot by those broadside macro cannon turrets where everything's just awful and torment and pain. They want to be farther away, picking at them, taking advantage of that really low sort of
understood.
Really low range that a lot of Imperial ships have, the poor accuracy they have at longer range, and just sort of hoping that you can chip away at their shields and their systems, destroy them with fighters and stuff like that. This thing stops them from doing that too much. My opponent here started off in the gas cloud or something like that. That's fine. I can flush him out eventually with the Nova Cannon. And like the thing about this is that it does have a very long cooldown time, 60 seconds. So you can't just spam these that easily yet. You can later on, and orcs can spam it out pretty quickly, pretty early on, which has been a pretty obnoxious thing to deal with, honestly. You can see the range for it. It's extremely long range, and there is a minimum distance. You can't fire at things that are sort of right beside you. But you don't have to see an enemy to launch that sort of ordnance at them. So it's very, very effective at dealing with things that are sort of in these gas clouds or something like that.
Understood.
We'll see if our opponent is going to make a move out of that gas cloud, or if we're going to have to try and jump in there. But what he's probably got is something like 2 Dauntlesses, or a Dauntless and a Dauntless Mark II.
Helm coordinates acknowledged.
That's just really realistically what you've got when you're starting out. The other thing my opponent could be trying to do is run silently to get close to me and then do an ambush surprise. That's what my last opponent actually did, is as Chaos just zoomed in, running silent, and then just jumped out, all guns blazing, and it didn't realize that you don't actually want to get that close with Chaos. It doesn't help all that much. Alright, so this area, this gigantic circle here, isn't actually the area of effect of the Nova Cannon. It's actually just the radius that it could randomly appear in. So as you can see, when it's closer, there's less scatter. When it's further out, there's more scatter. I don't really know what my opponent was doing that for. It's one of the annoying things about this game. I wish, you know, you could disable tactical cogitators. Oh. Here he is. So we're just going to aim that up. That scattered really front, so... He might, yeah, he did fly into the effect there a little bit, so it's pretty okay.
Ship ready.
We did manage to, oh, he flew both of them into the effect.
Engines hot.
Alright, so we could try and stasis bomb here, but honestly it's not going to work because they're just going to zip away. Either kind of bomb that this is not going to affect me all that much here. Like, yes, I'll lose my shields, but it doesn't really matter at this point in time because, yeah, no, that's not even the right kind of bomb. So he can use both his bombs here, and it'll just strip my shields because it's 200 damage between the two of them. And that honestly isn't enough damage for me to be worried about it. Alright. As you can see, I've still got a tiny tick of shields here, so I can ironically enough use supercharged void shields here. Let's go ahead and drop this down here.
Activating tactical cogitators.
Alright, he's activated that again. Got high energy turns coming in, and we're going to go ahead and take advantage of the fact that he's doing this. Activate our supercharged void shields here. And just wail away with our macro cannons on those broadsides here.
At your command. Understood.
Alright, so with him trapped in there, I might have...
Lock on target.
I might not be able to fire this at him. Yeah, no, he's going to be too close.
Activating tactical cogitators.
This is a real shame, but you know, he is taking some really big damage from those shots there. All right, we're going to focus on his weapons on both our ships here.
Your orders. Changing course.
All right, he's failed to board me there.
Underway.
He failed to board me there.
Activating tactical cogitators.
Man, he's just really using these tactical cogitators.
Engines hot.
Right, so that's one torpedo
Orders
hit, but
received.
Really am okay with that. We're gonna hit repairs just for the hell of it.
Begin repairs now. Engines hot.
Oh dear. Alright, so our opponent has decided to hit running silently here.
Awaiting orders.
Let's go ahead and keep vision on at least one of those targets.
Engines to maximum.
And we're gonna go ahead and drop this right here.
Resuming normal functions.
Alright. So it's 200 damage for a
Understood.
direct hit with that thing. Man, he is really hard on that tactical cogitator.
Yes, Admiral. Course plotted. Setting course.
No, we're gonna still be in that
Cruising
bomb
speed
radius.
set.
Well, whatever.
Changing course.
Oh man. So here you can see the weakness of these escorts. They don't deal all that much damage. We're gonna actually switch into the front-facing fire here. And we're gonna move back this way.
Awaiting
Yeah,
orders.
there we go.
Helm coordinates acknowledged.
Just trying to torpedo right up the tailpipe of that ship there.
Orders received.
And he is making a bit of a mistake running his ships closer towards my big old cruiser here.
Changing course. Course plotted. Engaging. Underway.
This is a fairly slow match just because I don't have
Acquiring
the
new
most
vector.
or the best guns for this sort of situation. Looks like I
Cruising
don't have
speed
the
set.
angles for a shot here.
Setting course.
My Nova Cannon, but I could try and get rammed here.
Engines hot.
Honestly, I don't mind getting rammed here.
Helm
There we go.
coordinates acknowledged.
For the Emperor.
So I'll go ahead and repair these guys.
At your command.
So this is the nice thing about
Setting
these
course.
big, heavy Imperial cruisers, is that they are durable enough that they can just not worry at all about these light cruisers and their attacks. Yeah, he's gonna go right into that, I think.
Your orders.
Just about.
We are the Imperial
These
Navy.
lighter cruisers of his, they are chipping away at me a
Orders
little bit
received.
here, but they're not doing anywhere near the kind of damage they need to do to actually kill my
Underway.
ship. Well, there he goes,
Changing
charges
course.
into my escort there. They're quite fragile, so if people just ram them, they tend to just
Awaiting
immediately
orders.
die. And there we go, that'll
Course
be
plotted.
GG as soon as this escort fires at him. Pop.
Ship ready.
No. Come on.
Understood.
Straight failure. Come on, little escort, you can do it. Yeah, it did it. And that's this big, beefy ship there. Its broadsides are absolutely vicious, and you can't stay away from it. This is why it's such a good ship. You don't want to get close to it, you don't want to stay far away from it. There's no safe zone when you're facing this type of ship. And when I'm using it, I get to just wail away at the broadsides, or I get to fire those macro cannons point blank, or I get to fire those long distance shots with the cannon. And like that combination is just the best pickup early game because of that flexibility. It works well against Eldar because it's got the macro cannons. It works well against Chaos because it forces them closer to you. It works well against Orcs because it just can survive in a slugging match, close range against them, while dealing some damage with them as they approach. It just is an all-around really, really good ship. So, yeah, you'll definitely want to pick up one of these as your first cruiser. After that, it's really easy to differentiate into whichever style of fleet that you want. But this is a very versatile pickup that I think all first-time newer admirals should pick up. For the crew of this thing, it's a little bit tricky. It depends on how you think you're going to play with it. If you're going to focus exclusively on something like the Nova Cannon, then something like the Servitors can be good since it'll let you do the reload skill more often and more frequently. If you're planning on being up close and personal, ratings can be extremely good because it also helps protect the ship. Personally, I'm fond of taking ratings on this type of ship because I don't want that expensive Nova Cannon getting blown up by enemy saboteurs. The other option, of course, is Master Gunner if you're going to be mostly focusing on taking out things with those broadsides of macro batteries. And this ship does excel at dealing things death with those macro batteries, and the Master Gunner can make that quite strong there. If we look at the stats of those guns, they don't have the greatest crit chance for a weapon of their rate of fire, but it's a decent crit chance, and you can definitely cause some significant damage using that. So that is an option that you could take. You could also go into the weaponry here and make them sort of more focused around all sorts of different types of macro battery attacks. And that's the only type of weapon it has. So you're very restricted. There's only 3 weapon upgrades for it, but plus the teleportarium, which is for lightning strikes. But this means that you can very much focus on making this a really good weapon. The armor-piercing ammunition, for example, if you want to be really up close, or you could try and make it into a longer-range ship, almost like a Chaos one, by taking the turbo weaponry, combine it with the targeting matrix. If we look at our stats here, we don't have the best accuracy out past 6,000. It's 40% from 6 to 9. So it's not great, but it's not terrible either. If we look at what the ship, though, I think is going to want to have at this early stage of the game. I personally still want to get additional void shield generators a lot of the time, although the Voss pattern void shield is a lot more enticing on this particular type of ship just because it's got that sort of stat line that I think works well. What I'm going to do on mine is probably get the additional void shield generator and then get the Mazoa pattern drive, just make it a little bit faster because it is extremely slow. It's got a speed of 150. If I get it up to 175, it'll keep up-ish to the light cruisers, and it doesn't help a ton. It's still a very, very slow ship, but it helps a little bit. But for now, I definitely feel like these those shields there are an extra good pickup for this sort of ship. Becomes extremely tanky, extremely durable, and eventually we might even go ahead and pick up our Adeptus Mechanicus favor, and then we'll be able to pick up yet another rank of one of these upgrades here. Probably going to use that extra one for something a little bit crazy, but who knows. Anyway, I hope you found this video informative, and of course, as always, I hope to see you all next time.